well.
I do not know. I
Where's the
hope
red
so, otherwise
light?
that means we can deadlock on things. Is that a flip of a coin at that point?
There it is.
Forget how that works.
No, you need 3 to pass.
I should look and see if I have
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Welcome, everyone, to the Centerville City Council meeting tonight, March 7th, 2017. We have almost a full house. We're expecting Councilman Ince to come at some point. We like to... What's that? And the mayor, of course. That's why I am in the seat, is the mayor is out of the country on business. So I will be running our meeting tonight. We do like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we've asked Russell Stringham, a visiting scout, to lead us in that.
Please stand. Please repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I've asked Councilwoman Meekum to give us a prayer.
Our kind Heavenly Father, we come before Thee. We ask Thee to please bless us and be with us, that we will be able to do the right things for our community. We are so very grateful to live in this great community that we live in and to serve great people. We're thankful for the peace that we have and the safety in our community. We ask Thee to please bless our first responders and their families as they protect and serve us. We ask Thee to please bless us as council members, that we will be able to make the decisions that would be best for our community. We ask Thee that we will be able to work together, and we will be able to work with staff to make our community a better place to live. We say this prayer in Christ, amen.
Amen. All right, we like to open our meetings with an open session, which is an opportunity for anyone who'd like to speak on any matter for 2 minutes or less. And so we invite anyone who'd be interested in speaking to us to come to either mic and share your thoughts with us. Okay, seeing as we have no takers tonight, we'll go ahead and start tackling the rest of our agenda. Our first item is to review our minutes from a January 31st work session and a February 21st council meeting. Were there any comments on that?
I'm still not ready to approve the minutes from the 31st of January. I still want to review the audio on that. I need to get hold of that. I think there's some substantial wording changes that need to take place, but in lack of the audio, I can't say what those are. So I need to get a copy of that, Steve, as soon as possible.
Well, were you expecting that? I didn't know.
No, I was mentioning that now because I've looked up on the public portal and I have not been able to find the audio. Is it in some other location now?
We've been trying to do a conversion from WMA to MP3, and we're losing the audio when we do it.
Okay, so I was wondering if it was just me, but I was going up there and I could not find the audio file. So
yeah, we're having technical problems.
How does that work
conversion.
from the legal posting standpoint if we don't have the audio available within the specified period?
Well, we should try to comply with that.
Okay.
Good answer.
So what can we do, Jake, to get an audio to George in the meantime?
Well, we can convert it onto a CD for you.
That's fine. That'd be great. I'd love to listen to that. In fact, if you could just give it to everyone, I think there's some, we talked about that a little bit just briefly, and I think we need to listen to the audio on that again.
Okay. Was there something that you wanted to expand more on? And
there's quite a bit of items I want to expand on, but without having the audio, I could wax poetic and they wouldn't be the words that came from the meeting. So I don't want to summarize something incorrectly.
So you'll work on that, and then for our next meeting, write up a summary so we can review it in the packet?
Yeah, I'll submit some comments prior in email just so we've got some items. I mean, not that we'll have the debate outside of the public forum, but I just want to say here, for the next meeting, there'll be an attachment of what I think I've heard, and If anyone wants to listen to the audio and tell me different, that's fine too.
Okay.
So at this point, are we making audio for everybody, or just George and then the rest of you if you want it, or?
I'd be happy to listen to it.
I would too.
Okay, 3 of you.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move forward though with the February 21st minutes then. from
So
the council
do we
meeting.
need to officially table those
Yeah, do you want to
until
make a
next time?
motion to table that again? They're still tabled, right? So if they just remain tabled?
Well, you need a motion to table it again.
Okay.
Motion to table the minutes from January 31st, 2017, the work session preliminary draft minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. February 21st. Any changes to that? Okay, do we have a motion? I'll move that we approve February 21st, 2017 City Council meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have no summary action items tonight, and so we'll move right to a public hearing. This is for some zoning code amendments to our accessory building setbacks, and this is an issue that the council has requested be looked at by the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission has sent us a recommendation. Corey, would you like to report to us on that?
Which report would you like us to bring up? If you look at those documents there, Corey, do you want us to bring up one of those?
Just the ordinance that
Just the
changed,
ordinance. Okay.
so you can see that change. Thank you, council. As set earlier in a goal session, the discussion of looking at the accessory building setbacks, by way of just background, we did separate, there are 2 types of distinct zoning that in our residential areas. Well, there's 3 in our residential areas, but there's 1 different in the agriculture. And we pulled the agriculture out for now because the expectation of the types of accessory buildings are different than the expectations of the typical residential zones. And so we do have slated to come back with the agricultural zone setbacks. But I just wanted you to know that we did separate those out. So what we're dealing with is the residential zones of residential low, residential medium, residential high. And by way of understanding, there is a line item table in the residential zone districts covering those 3 types of residential zones. This says accessory buildings, and all categories for accessory buildings is 3 feet. So it doesn't matter what residential type district you're in, the accessory buildings start at 3 feet. And so we're replacing that line item with the recommendation and expanding that to 3 columns or 3 rows instead of a singular row of just 3 feet. We did approach it from the premise to increase the setbacks. The question became in the study of how much. What ultimately came out from the Planning Commission, and I can discuss the background if you have questions on it, is that the first concept that was identified, the first line item, maintained the 3-foot setback. But it maintained the 3-foot setback for those portable or semi-permanent. There was a discussion, what's portable, what's not portable, but essentially think of a tough shed. And you can have some rather substantial size tough sheds, but the building code exempts any building under 200 square feet from the building code. So your tough sheds, a 10 by 10 tough shed that you would purchase and put on your lot does not come through the city for a permit. Those are just simply allowed by right within that district. And they maintained in the recommendation to leave those types of non-permitted, or not, it's the wrong word, but you don't have to get a permit to get that tough shed. Leave them at the 3 feet setback that's already existing. They also distinguished, as part of it, the separation of a 2-story versus 1-story. So when we move out of the portable or the semi-permanent, and let's say you have a 2-car garage, something that might be 400 or 500 square feet, but larger than the tough shed. Those are more permanent, and they're at that point in time, various sizes require different types of footings, and we just categorize that as long as it's 1 story and it's this larger building that requires a permit, we'll move that to the 5-foot setback. Might ask, where does the 5-foot setback comes? It comes from the building code, because buildings that are closer than 5 feet to the property line when you're at this size require a 1-hour firewall. So zoning would let you go to 3 feet, but to go to 3 feet, you have to put the 1-hour firewall in. And that becomes kind of complicated for people that just want to build and self-build a shed, because if you explained a 1-hour firewall in its simplistic forms, you would have the wall built of your 2x4s, and you'd have 5/8x sheetrock on both sides and your siding. And you have to have your vapor barrier to protect the sheetrock and so forth. Now, your cinder block can often qualify for your 1-hour firewall, so somebody built something out of cinder block. But the concept is that if you have accessory building in the building code, there needs to be a 10-foot separation between those types of buildings, 5 feet on one property, 5 feet on another property. Now you have your 10-foot separation, and now you don't have to fireproof that wall. And so moving that back seemed that the 1-story at the 5-foot provides that life safety separation at minimum and has some buffer by moving to the 5 feet versus the 3 feet. And that's the 1-story. The third category is going to a 2-story. So an example is a 1-story in the definition change is 10 feet. We're still measuring to the half point of the peak. So the lowest eave, top peak. So you're probably looking at a 1-story anywhere from 14 to 16 feet in height on that type of measurement. But if you go to 2-story, where you're now moving to a 2-story standard or exceed that average 10-foot height, you'll be considered a 2-story. So somebody with a great big massive roof may only have a single story, but it's a massive roof, then it becomes qualified now as a 2-story under that category. The 2-story, any size, moves to the minimum house setback of 8 feet. And so that's the third category. So example that you see that probably driven this controversy, separating out that one of them is an ag zone, and we're going to come back to that. The building that's off the property line of complaint is sitting at 6 feet right now. And so it would move that building in its original format, if it was built today, additional 2 feet. And so the Planning Commission ended the discussion with making that simple distance. They did study a complex ratio scenario, and it just came out to being that the ratio wasn't really accomplishing anything. If you did more than these setbacks, the ratio to get to a lower ratio element, you're moving the building pretty far into the backyard. And staff's feeling, and the Planning Commission seemed to agree with it, that most people do not want to center their accessory building in their backyard. So now you have the balance of how much do you push to buffer versus people don't want to have too much space to take care of. 5 feet, it's better than 3 feet. 3 feet will probably be weeds. 5 feet setback, you'll probably get maybe something that could be stored there. 8-foot setback, probably can get a trailer back there. In addition, screened by a back fence. So the usable area increases the more you do the setback, but how far should you push a large building into the backyard? So they settled on the 3 categories. 3 feet for small, 1-story, any size, the 5 feet, 2-story, any size, 8 feet. And that's what they recommended.
You said that you'd get back to the fact that agricultural was left out. Do you mean that we'll revisit that? And
I'm
look
slated
more
to
closely?
revisit that unless you don't want to, but yes, it's scheduled to come back. The dealing with the agricultural zones is that it begins at 5 feet already, so we're not at the 3 feet in the agriculture. That's why the one building was located at 6 feet. But we have different parameters. You can go higher with accessory buildings because we're anticipating barns, things of larger facilities. And so I just didn't want to confuse the tough shed issue with the barns and other facilities issue that are larger structures, where we may have room to move them back even further. So I wanted to just keep the agricultural accessories in a different discussion and not be roped into the residential lot, the typical residential lot.
All right, questions for staff?
What's the offset from a residence? I'm trying to do the math. So to get from the residence to the beginning of a building, you need how many feet? So if you're measuring in the back from the,
You're not measuring from a residence, you're measuring from the property line.
so you can have the accessory building snuggled up 4 feet away from the house and you'll be fine?
If it's separated between buildings, it's 6 feet.
Okay, that's the number I was looking
Yeah.
for.
Between existing buildings on the site, there's a mandatory 6-foot separation.
Is that new?
No. Not from 2003. I don't know about 90s and 70s, but from 2003. Sorry, clarify that.
Because mine's 12 inches.
Yeah, now the idea of you have the separation to be able to pull a stretcher and emergency crew between buildings. And so you need the 6-foot corridor to do that. A lot of people like to put the buildings and then attach breezeways. That becomes problematic at some
So-
point in time.
As I understand code, once this is passed, there's really no exception to it, even if 2 neighbors agree.
There's a yes and a no.
That's easy.
The no is on the neighbors. So if 2 neighbors agree, it's irrelevant. The code sits in place. The yes comes from, let's say you have an existing garage and your setback is supposed to be 8 feet. Let's pretend it's a 2-story. And somebody says, I want to do an addition onto that garage, but it's going to be really awkward now to bump it. Let's say it's, what did I say, 5 feet. You want to bump it to 8 feet. So I have this weird jog that's going to occur if I add this on, and I'm trying to pull my nice 350 dually with my big cuddy cabin boat, and I've got this 3-foot jet in, just trying to pretend that somebody.
That makes
Sense. What can you do? Is there relief? Technically, there's a relief. You go to the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment evaluates its impact on the neighbors. So you're not looking at 2 neighbors agreeing. You're giving 5 citizens a chance for a resident to come in and say, hey, I already have this building in this situation, and if I'm not, there's some findings that the Board of Adjustment has to make, and if they can meet those findings, they could extend an existing building, but a new building would be automatically at the 8.
And you couldn't even take the new building to Board of Adjustment?
No, new building would not be eligible for a Board of Adjustment.
So, Corey, if you were to guess, what's the average height of a 1-story house? I know there's a lot of variation, but
You're probably trying to guess at it. You know, you're looking at your ceiling height. Let's say you're just a typical attic with a typical truss system. You know, and I'm not talking about the 1940 house. That's I think an anomaly issue. A house, a rambler, a size, flat ground, dealing with it, you're still probably looking at 20 to 22, 23 feet, depending on their roof.
To the peak.
To the peak.
no, well, yeah, and so my concern is
So
that-
average height, 18.
My concern is that statement, depending on the roof.
Yes, the
because-
roof pitch makes a big difference on the size of
Right.
the roof. A 12-12 is
and
very
so
steep.
A 20-foot limit here can actually, and 20 feet for an accessory building is plenty generous, in my opinion, and the,
20 feet, if you remember the example, ranged from about 24 to 28 feet. A 12-12 would probably reach around 28 feet on average.
right, so in reality, when you add the roof, the way this is calculated, and I'm not sure if the council's aware of how it's calculated, so maybe we should explain that, but it's actually much higher than 20 feet.
20 feet is the average height between the lowest eave and the highest peak.
Right, so if you have a
Yeah,
10,
but
if,
Yeah,
Most
we've covered
ones-
this issue before as
Yeah.
far
But
as.
most
But we're not
ones-
looking at the main building, we're only concerned about the accessory
but
buildings tonight.
but that same
right?
measurement applies to the 20-foot limit for the accessory building,
Correct.
right?
So 1 story is defined as up to 20 feet.
1 story is the average of 10 feet.
10 feet.
Yeah,
In
How are
this
we getting to
case.
20? I missed, how are we getting to 20?
Your maximum height overall for any accessory building, so let's say they wanted to do a 2-story at the 8 feet, the maximum average height is 20. If you want to, if you don't want to go to 8 feet, you have to go down to the 10-foot average to get the 5 and the 3.
Okay, so Tammy, then I'm lost. Where are you coming up with this 20?
I'm just wondering if we want to create a limit at 20 feet rather than it being
That's
average.
where you can, and we could go back and assess that. I discouraged that in your earlier discussion. And the reason I discouraged it is because we do have fairly large desires of buildings to put your RVs and your boats and so forth in. If you think of a typical fifth wheel trailer, you need 18 to 19 feet to the top of the roof to get the trailer and the air conditioner unit under that. So now if you do 20 feet, you're doing a flat roof garage, and those are really not great design in this environment.
Yeah, they're very problematic in snow environments.
Yeah. So you want to go to 22, 23 feet just to get a 412 pitch.
Okay.
And that wouldn't match some of the designs. So if you went to Ford Canyon and tried to max it at 20 top, most of your accessory buildings in the Ford Canyon wouldn't qualify.
Okay. All right, any other questions of clarification for staff at this point? All right, thank you. This has been noted as a public hearing, and so if we have anyone who would like to comment on this issue, we'd love to hear from you. You could come up to either mic and let us know what you think about us increasing the setback for accessory buildings in backyards. No takers?
Sound
All right.
panels didn't cover that.
All right, then I will close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for further discussion.
I don't know that there is much discussion on this one. I mean, it's really straightforward as far as how it goes.
Okay, I think it's at least some progress towards solving an issue that we have seen can be problematic. There's going to be no perfect solution, but I'm glad to see an effort made to be trying to be a little more sensitive to the impacts to both neighbors.
Motion that we adopt ordinance 2017-04 accessory building setbacks.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. All right, we'll be moving on to our item number 3, which is another public hearing, and this is general plan amendments to the southeast neighborhood.
Does it matter that we're ahead of schedule when it's been noticed as a public hearing?
It does not. We have changed our policy on that, so
Thank you.
we can move forward.
You're correct to think because it used to.
We can ask Corey 20 minutes of questions. That'll put us back on schedule.
I think we're just fine if we're ahead of schedule. That's my goal.
Great, I'd rather have questions than spend 20 minutes just making stuff up.
No pressure to spend any minimum amount of time.
All right. Well, I'll try to go through this quickly just to hit the highlights so you can get to the details if you have questions. As indicated, you had a goal to look at the Southeast Neighborhood Plan. We have split that plan into essentially for now 2 parts. The first part is to address the residential areas of the Southeast neighborhood, to talk about the density issues. That was a goal to achieve. We have not, and we're waiting for the work session that's scheduled tentatively, I think, for the next meeting of the council to meet with the Planning Commission, talk about the Pages Lane, and then the last area is the Main Street, and that would complete the Southeast. So tonight's recommendation is simply the residential areas of that neighborhood. We provided to you, there should be 2 copies. One is a clean copy, and then we provided you the edited copy. I had some questions, so just clarification on the document that's supposed to have gone to you, and I think it did follow through. The edits are red and in strikeout, and the removals are in the red, and strikeout, and the blue is the new language. Just thematically in the first section, I tried to introduce the argument and purpose, and the Planning Commission adjusted this a little bit because we used words like trend and dominant and so forth if you read into the minutes. But essentially it's trying to update the language and say there has been an effort in times past, and we're feeling the recent pressure of multifamily as a development pattern. And the pressures of this neighborhood is felt with that intensity and densities in the multifamily, and that we're trying to balance and protect the residential neighborhoods from that encroachment of that in density in multifamily, and trying to protect that. So I'm trying to update the language and reflect. We're feeling that pressure in this neighborhood, and we want to achieve that balance. And so we're going to be having that discussion of how do we protect those single-family neighborhoods and then deal with the patterns, the land use patterns of the commercial areas in that neighborhood. So that was the attempt to introduce the purpose and update the cause. The second thematic, to keep kind of in the background and hopefully provide some clarity, is the Planning Commission recognized in the single-family neighborhoods that the single-family neighborhoods in the city are not necessarily at 4 units an acre. That's our current zoning of RL, but they're not. But the existing neighborhoods aren't necessarily at that density, because we had an old R18 zone, which was an 8,000 square foot lot. And some of our areas have been developed in the city in the 8,000 square foot lot, which is really over a fifth, 5 units per acre. So the Planning Commission.
Can you tell us where quickly?
Shaylin Heyman, that lives over here, lives in one of those subdivisions. She's the one that brought it up, actually. So we had some R18 and R110 type of zoning. So even if you think of our R110 in the old past, that's 10,000 square foot lot. You have to be at 10,800 to be the quarter acre. Now, the fair is that we're at a gross density, so you're subtracting out the roads. And so we're probably somewhere between 4.5 to 5 units per acre when you net out an actual subdivision. But the Planning Commission said there are some areas of residential medium, the low end, above 4 units an acre, but they're single-family uses. And so you do see a unique plug-in in the several neighborhoods of residential medium, but not residential medium multifamily. It's residential medium single-family. We don't have right now a zoning designation for that. And so that's something that would have to be looked at in the future, is if we take our RL zones, is there a 2-step pattern to the RL zones, the quarter acre lot areas versus the 5th and 6th acre lot areas, if you will. And so that's what the Planning Commission introduced back into in the future, is the opportunity in some cases that we might have a low end of the medium density for single family. So that would be yet to be discovered, but that's you'll see the residential medium single family is a unique term that's been created in this process.
Well, and Corey, I'll also just mention that you're referring back to when R18 existed, but also through the PDO or the PUD, that happens quite often as well.
That can happen also there too. Yeah. So the opportunity is from the Planning Commission standpoint is there might be ability to go to the 9,000 square foot lot, which would be 5 units an acre, and still get the single family uses and the size home we want, but maybe not so large of a piece of property to mowing lawns and more efficient use of the land, but still keep the protection of a single family neighborhood. So think about that. It would take maybe some new thoughts in the zoning ordinance to implement that. And where and when is totally yet to be decided, but they're leaving that pattern in place in the plan. The second one is we had a kind of a merge. You have the Old Town site, which is really the Old Town plats of the city, but a lot of the Old Town plats are also in the Dual Creek Historic District now. And there was a merge to those two, and then the Planning Commission looked at it and said, that's too confusing because the boundaries are not exactly aligned. So they split it out, and there's an Old Town site recognizing the Old Town plat pattern and its policies, but there is an overlap, a lot of that Old Town site in the Dual Creek District. And so we have 2 different neighborhoods overlapping each other. Ultimately, it's a single-family neighborhood, but there's also the encouragement in the Dual Creek area to use the incentives that has been in our historic preservation program. So that's a concept that was applied to it. Another one, and I was clear to make this known to the Planning Commission, if you look at the Centerville Elementary area, Centerville Elementary area in our residential, this is Parish Lane, and historically it's been Parish Lane, South Side, 100 East, roughly both sides, 100 north, the north side. That's our residential medium zone today in the zoning ordinance. And if you recall back a year and a half ago, this became a discussion on whether we should be changing that RM zone. I left it intact based on the council's directive of the past. And so the buffer around the elementary, City Hall, Founders Park of a residential medium has been left intact with this plan. And so,
Corey, did the commission discuss this idea of residential medium, single-family home use only being applied to that area?
they didn't. They didn't. And they didn't highlight that an issue. I just made sure that I disclosed that I left that in.
That it had been brought up in the past as
but
maybe
I-
an inconsistency,
Yeah,
but.
but I left it in. So that's something that you can, if you desire to have a discussion about. The Planning Commission did not grab a hold of that and worry about it. They left it as in. So I just wanted to be forthright with you on that. The Centerville junior high area, the text was written before really the courtyard at Pages was built. It recognizes the Riviera townhomes, so we went through and updated that language, and we're still saying, okay, that's the extent. The rest of the neighborhood is to be the single-family uses.
And tell me again which one the courtyard is.
Pages Lane, it's on the,
It's actually the northwest corner, although the text says the northeast corner of Pages.
did we get it wrong?
Lane and Main.
north,
Is it east?
Yeah, the
northeast.
courtyard is the mansion townhomes, which is 4 townhomes. They're very tall,
Got the great
kind
big
of
lawn out in front, and the
beige.
fence.
It's mostly lawn out front.
Yeah, all right.
Centerville Commons is on the north
On the
That's what I-
west.
next one.
That's what I was trying to,
And those are the single-family homes close together,
Yeah.
PUD.
That would be an example perhaps of the medium-density,
Right.
single-family home that he was referring to, Centerville Commons on the northwest.
Yeah, that's northwest. The extreme south Main Street area, that's the odd behind the Deseret Industries. And so we left that, intact with either going low or high. Just so you know, there's already a subdivision process in place. You approved the rezone to low. That's moving forward in its preliminary, so it will ultimately end up into the residential low, the infill area with 7 additional homes. But we just kind of left that, you have that area that has the duplexes, and so we kind of left that intact with there. An interesting comment, just by way of having fun to editorialize to you, the Planning Commission talked about the foothills and said, well, aren't the foothills in this area? And it was kind of like, yeah. And it was Commissioner Daly, Kevin Daly said, well, I think we ought to mention to it. Planning Commission became a little bit concerned because they didn't want to say, hey, the future is to build on this foothills land. They were really concerned. And so when I went back and made the edits from the original discussion, I thought Commissioner Daly had a great comment that the foothills are a part of this area. But to relieve the anxiety was just to recognize the foothills as a part of this community, but it's subject to the foothills management plan, which means that we're not interested in annexing until X, Y, Z, and AA and BB have been completed, and then we might consider annexing it. So it recognizes it, but doesn't set what the future is. It's leaving it to the foothills management plan and the annexation policies. The other thing that's in there is we go in and explicitly eliminate residential high in all the areas. So that covers the thematic elements. If you have any questions, I'm ready. If not,
So I guess we can revisit where we're talking about where there are edits to where it says low to medium throughout the text. Is it simply they added medium because we don't have the granularity in low to produce the desired effect?
for the higher end, the
Right.
low end of the higher single family, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we had granularity, the text could remain as low without really causing heartburn.
Correct.
Okay.
And when I read it, the fact that there was the, single-family home only on the medium use, it didn't give me heartburn as I read it.
Okay.
But it might be because I know and understand that a lot of newer homes are just built to that spec anyway, right? To that smaller lot size. So it's the trend. Other questions for staff?
But that was something the commission wanted to add it, so it was very specific
Yeah.
for that recommendation.
Speaking of that, it was really interesting to read back, and I appreciated the new recorder's very detailed minutes, because you really got a sense for how the conversation went.
Yeah.
It was great. Okay. Any other questions at this point? We can cover more during discussion.
This
but-
section does cover J.A. Taylor, and we don't specifically call out that area, because it doesn't fall under any of the others. It's not
Right.
the Old Town, and it's not the Dual Creek Historic, and it's not the Centerville Elementary, and it's not the junior high,
Right.
the
and-
way I see it.
Yeah, the explanation of that at the time with the planning commission is it falls within the south area. The only time J.A. Taylor comes up is when the Pages Lane commercial gets addressed.
Yeah.
And we're still coming back to that Pages Lane. And my tentative idea is that we will eliminate that issue, and now Pages Lane will separate, and that area will transition back into the south. Not the extreme south, the southeast area.
The southeast.
So I haven't-
But if you want to come back after we edit that and add that back in, that's something we can do. If you want to add it now, we can go back and try to do
My
that.
concern is this, and I don't know if this is the right place to put it. Schools are growing in size, not just in population, but as they build and as they add on, they are getting bigger. And I don't think it would be that big a stretch to say that the school district would build either a larger Centerville Elementary or a larger J.A. Taylor or something and combine those schools and sell off the other property. And I don't know how to put into our ordinance, our suggestions that if that property changes uses, that it reverts to the residential
Yeah.
code for the
Right,
rest of
and
it.
that's a great point. What I would say is and I'm anticipating it, if you go back into the pages and eliminate the J.A. Taylor from the commercial district, it'll just then fall back into the low to the medium.
And so it'll automatically,
Yeah. The only way that gets separated out is because the Pages Lane commercial mentions it.
So Centerville Elementary would be the same if they were to sell it? It would just be single-family, low to medium?
Well, not exactly,
No, because
because you
it's in the higher
you
area.
have the RM going up Parish on the south side. So the question will be is if they do that, where's the boundary that you're going to rezone from public facility to medium?
Okay.
All right, any other questions of clarification at this point? Okay, thank you, Corey. We might call you back up. This has been noticed also as a public hearing. If anyone has some comments for us to consider on this matter, we'd invite you to come speak at this point. Thank you. Tell us your name.
Dean Williams at 130 West 550 South, below the junior high. And I've visited with you before about my concerns with high density, and especially with the Dix Market area. If that goes into high density, which isn't the plan now, but I don't want something, I'm tired of all the high density in the south end of Centerville. And I think we're overloaded. We have the business, we have the dense residents, and I think we have enough there. And I know you have a lot on your plate, and I appreciate the decisions that you have to make, because I would hate to have to make them. But I'll just give you one example, and then I retired from West Valley Fire. And when I started out there were 68,000 people, and we ran 2,800 calls a year out of 3 stations. Now there are 130,000 people. We're running 9,500 calls out of 5 stations. They have plans now to build another fire station, which means you hire 20 more firefighters. And they're not doing that because the area increased. They're doing that because the density and the call load has increased. So when developers come in and they say that it doesn't have a big impact on police and fire, baloney. And I'll talk to them for 100 years about that, because that's what I've experienced. And this fire station over here is shorthanded. All of South Davis's equipment is shorthanded. It would never survive in the Salt Lake Valley. But that's my concern, is the impact that we're going to do on the police and fire and on the schools and on the streets and on the transportation and just on the general lifestyle in that section of the city. That is the only part of the town that seems to be up for grabs, and it needs to stay zoned as low whatever you're calling your zoning now, single-family homes, just like down where I live west of the junior high. That's what I'd like to see stay in there.
Thank you.
Any questions for me?
Yeah. What is high density?
Brighton Homes on West Porter Lane, Station Park. I drove through Station Park the other day and I lived out there for a while and I couldn't wait to get out of there. And I know that when the plans were going in for Walmart, it was going back and forth between Walmart and high density. And there was a developer who came in and said, look, we've done our studies. Their single family home doesn't have any, they have the same amount of call volume as an apartment unit. And so I said, okay, that may be true, but if you have 4 homes per acre, single family homes, and you have 26 units per acre in multi-density or in high density, that's 26 calls per year versus 4 calls per year. So you can tweak the numbers any way you want, but it does have an impact. So to me, high density is anything more than 3 or 4 units per acre.
So you would object to what we're talking about
Well,
tonight, which takes it up a little, basically.
Yeah, and it depends on how far you're going to take it up. And I know that a lot of the new homes are being built on smaller lots, like you mentioned. So I don't know what the trend is in the city with the new subdivisions with single-family homes on smaller lots. To me, I'd wish my wife would get rid of half my lot.
But then you'd be high density.
Yeah, I could put another unit in my backyard. But I'd like to stay around 4 units. That's what it is now.
Okay, thank you, Dane.
Thanks for your question. Any others?
Bear with me one second.
We try to do as little back and forth in the public hearing as
Yeah,
possible.
I understand that, and I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to us on this matter? All right. Well, I appreciate Dean's comment, and it's an opportunity to just summarize and be clear a little bit that concern that we've heard is exactly why the council directed the Planning Commission to revisit the Southeast Neighborhood General Plan so that we could get more clarity and maybe reduce that constant pressure that we were feeling towards high density. And so that is the process that's going on right now. And we will, after this step of the process is complete, be moving on to visit the Pages Lane, Dix Market, Pages Lane area. Okay. I will go ahead and close the public hearing then and turn it over to the council for further discussion.
So I'm just going to jump. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. You jump in. Ladies first. Ladies first. Oh, I'm just going to step back. Go ahead.
I have a question, Corey, about maybe in order to get a little bit a better handle on this, giving us a little more tools on our zoning density, like having an R5. I mean, so that we don't go from R4 to R8, which is what we have now. Or coming back to, I noticed that there's a place here that is now R8, but it was only R2, and it was taken to R8 because they did away with the R2. So could we bring back an R2 so that we could have a little bit of a buffer, but not such a humongous, not giving them such a high density?
Well, that's the beauty of zoning. You can create classifications as you see fit. I mean, the only planner issue is don't create 42 different classifications because that gets really difficult to management. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways. Example, in a place I worked, Ogden City, you had an R2 that was general, but you had an R2 EC, which was the East Central neighborhood. So even though it's the same type of uses, the parameters of densities changed based on the East Central versus the later suburban development. And so the answer is yes, you can use and reclassify categories to reflect your expectations as you see fit. And then the nomenclature is just something we work out to match what the requirements and areas and densities you want. So, you could go an RM, Jewel Creek, that could be a different level versus just RM in general, or RL, Dual Creek. I mean, there's just a myriad of ways to handle that. And that's why I wanted to point out this low end of medium density, because right now we just say density's low is this, density medium is this, density high is that. And then we have these broad ranges. And that's been the angst of everything that's been going on, is how broad the range is versus a permitted versus a conditional. We can go back in and reset those parameters. And, you know, if some areas need to be lowered, they're lowered from the top amount. But you can keep a general category, but then you can add a subcategory to the same element and say, RL for this neighborhood is something different than the RL for that neighborhood, not in uses, it's still single family, but in how we apply some of the development standards.
So my question is on here where we are taking, okay. Sorry, let me get on the right page here. Okay, so here it says the residential, and we're adding residential zoning within the old town site is to be maintained in a low, which is how it always is, and then we're adding to a medium density single family. So we're keeping single family, but what is, to a medium, is that the only way they, right now, that they could do that would be to put 8 homes per acre for that medium density.
They don't have to put 8, but they can.
No, but they can put 8, and so are we encouraging that by putting this in?
Don't get confused with the RM that's attached to multifamily. It would be
Okay.
8 units an acre. Right now, your RL in all of that neighborhood is 4 units an acre. We'd have to go back in and adjust the RL category.
So why are we adding to medium? What is medium?
Because medium is 5 units an acre, and some of your single-family subdivisions are 5 units an acre, not 4 units an acre.
So medium is only 5 per acre.
No,
Only
it's
4.
5 to 8.
Bumps
It's
the whole
5 to
range.
8 versus 1 to 4.
So I think, Robin, and that was the same point I was going to jump in, that's why I asked the granularity, is to me, when we put in low to medium, it signals we're open to that full range, and you're really not. You're not open to that. You're open to
Right.
5. So I'm almost of the opinion you don't accept that text amendment, you leave it at low, and you immediately come back with the planning commission and say, we need a granularity range that's acceptable, still communicates that you're looking for low, because the problem is managing the infill based on the property is going to be really, really tough. Whereas it's already been mentioned, impact in the south has felt really, really hard. You do the same thing in the north up where there's some agricultural properties and things like that. It's not necessarily going to be as felt. I'm not saying that we should do that. I'm just saying that you balance the two. So I think what you're really looking for, and I'm summarizing for you, sorry, but I do that. You're really looking for granularity, and you want the intent to stay the same. At least that's what I'm looking for. I think you're looking for the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
What is the density of that new development on Lund Lane and Frontage Road?
That was a PDO, so it went, I think they added 3 additional units to the 4 units an acre. So
So
there's
there's 7.
somewhere between 4, about 5 units an acre.
And
Well,
Centerville
it's-
Commons, an example that we've referenced tonight is.
About 5.5.
I thought it was closer to 6, right?
5.5, 6
I
units an
think, I
acre.
thought it was maybe
Between
6.
5 and 6, I think, is my
Yeah.
recollection.
But they're 5 and 6 that are up, which,
And then Pioneer, the new Pioneer, the single-family homes in Pioneer is another example that's.
They're on 5,000 square foot lots.
Yeah, so that's closer to 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you just measured just the single family on that.
And those homes were very popular. That's popular neighborhoods, so.
Well, to give you another reference, my home is on 2/10 of an acre. My subdivision built in the late 70s. Many lots in that subdivision are only 2/10.
Right.
Gas crunch, no lawnmower fuel, I get that.
Right.
Go-
So it
go-
gets a little bit tricky to, if we already have some single-family homes that people really like the neighborhood and the feel of that, and that's pushing 7, I don't know if we'd want to change really what the intent of what the Planning Commission has done and presented us, so much as come back and say, is there that big of a difference between the possible 7 and 8 if it's in a single-family home situation?
Well, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but it looks like we have contradictory language. And you look at where it says, in the same one that you were citing, we were talking about low to medium.
George, where are you reading? So we can
I'm
put it
reading
up on the board.
from where Robin was, where it's the subsection 1, the residential zoning with the old town site. What page is that? That's page.
It's the second
It's section 1
Yeah,
under
section
Old
1.
Town
So,
Site.
so we say
1A1.
it's to be maintained in low to medium density, then we talk about medium or high density is prohibited from any future development. So I
Well,
guess.
but read it's medium and high density, non-single family.
Right. So I guess, where we're using the word maintain, we're fine, and that we're talking about non-single family, I think we're okay, but I don't know, I'm still troubled by even putting the word in there, it's medium, where the intent has been very clear from the council to maintain low density in that area.
Well, another possible solution is to change our definitions of low and medium and high. And that's something that I've always said, is that people really react strongly to high density, but our high density numbers are really low, and our medium density numbers are really low. And so compared to other cities, our residential low might capture all of this if our numbers were more comparable, I think, to what other.
Yeah, my only statement is, remember, the zoning ordinance is to reflect the general plan. So if you guide to the future that low end of medium density is okay, as the language in here, then that means the zoning ordinance would have to be adjusted to meet that expectation.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say, is to remember that this is the general plan.
Right.
And so we can accept the general ideas and premises here, and then
Yeah, because nobody can
tweak
come in
more.
and ask for a medium single family right now because the zoning ordinance doesn't allow it.
Right.
Right. But a general plan guides for your future, so if the intent for the council, at least this council, is low, then your language of medium shouldn't be in there.
Exactly, if that's your intent, exactly.
So, and to your point, Tammy, yeah, the definitions changed based on where you're at. I mean, urban blight in Wyoming is being able to see your neighbor, right? So our definitions are going to be different, but I think we should be we shouldn't try and package this up so we're just changing the words and getting exactly the same output. If we said that high density is we're using a new term like moderately increased density, it doesn't change the impact to the neighborhood. So I think we should be clear with our terms. And I like the idea of adding granularity so at least people know, well, what does medium mean? Well, medium means, right now it's a spread, but if it's, low 5, then it's 5 homes maximum per acre.
But I
And
think
then it's very distinct and tailorable to a neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're really on the same page. It's just a little bit of a language difference. So in my mind, when people think residential low, they think a single-family home neighborhood. So for instance, the new single-family homes are over in Pinea. The townhomes, they don't think that's residential low. But the single-family homes, if you asked people, I think they would say, well, that's a single-family home neighborhood, so it's residential low, even though the densities are a little bit higher than our current definition of that. So I was just going to say that I appreciated the clarification with the RM, but saying single-family home, because I think what that does is respects the desire for people to respect the existing single-family home neighborhoods, and yet also respect the desire for the market. And, even like our public commenter stated, a lot of people are starting to feel like my yard's too big. And that's kind of the trend towards the future. So those smaller lot, single-family homes are very marketable and in demand.
So what is the implementation when you're in an area that has anything from a 10,000 square foot, or from an 8,000 square foot to a 12,000 square foot lot? Is the implementation that changes this, that I go in and buy 3 contiguous lots and then come in and rezone that 3 contiguous lots, which just works, and I'm making this up, works out to be 7/10 of an acre, okay? And I rezone those, asking for permission to build instead of 5. So now I'm at, those numbers don't quite work out, but I'm getting down close to what Steve is talking about, of 2/10 of an acre on a lot, considerably, well, that's not all that much less than 1/4 of an acre.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out how the change is implemented. What causes it to happen? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does, but I think they're going to add to your confusion, unfortunately, with the answer. Right now, the implementation of single-family density is a gross density of 4 units an acre. So if you were thinking of the typical lot size, which it's not, most people are thinking, I have to have a 1/4 acre lot, or I have to have a 10,800 square foot lot. That's not true. The gross density is a 1/4 acre. When you subtract out the roads and the other elements of the subdivision, you're going to approach about 5. You're going to approach about a 9,000 square foot lot. Now remember, the density is the minimum. You go to Ford Canyon, and they didn't even go to the minimums because they were looking for a different marketable product. And so this medium, this low is fluid. Right now, your 1/4 acre, 4 units an acre is really about 5 units an acre at net.
Well, and not only that, but if you're taking the whole subdivision, it's the average, right? So, for instance, Shaylin Heyman brought this up in Planning Commission because she lives on my street, and her lot is maybe 8,000 square feet, and my lot's 13,000 square feet. But someone's not going to drive down my street and think, oh, that Heyman lot shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, and so the gross density allows the twofold. Take a cul-de-sac. You've got a corner that's sitting on a collector. You got a cul-de-sac at the end of the deep. If you did a minimum size lot of 10,800 square feet, that means that the corner lot on the arterial is the same size as the cul-de-sac lot at the bottom. And the developers say, well, I've got to make up the market price somehow, and it's very difficult. So you're paying more for the corner lot because they're trying to make it up for how big that lot has to be. Under the gross density, they could go down to about a 6,000 square foot lot on that arterial. They just have to balance it out at the end of the street with a large lot to make up that difference.
So
and they can charge a higher price on the end lot in the cul-de-sac. And that's how they make up the difference. And the purpose of the gross density right now, and I think what you're struggling is we're still locked in a medium lot size.
Yeah.
The gross density is to be fluid and flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say residential medium, if you want to be strict about it, our 4 acre subdivisions are at the low end on the net of medium.
All right.
Already.
4 acre or 4 per acre?
4 per acre nets out.
You said 4 acre.
Yeah, excuse me. 4 per acre nets out to be about a 9,000 square foot lot instead of a 10,800.
So this is probably an unfair question. I apologize.
That's all right.
I've done it to you before.
I'm paid to take the arrows.
So when a real estate listing shows 0.27 acres, which is what mine happens to show, is that gross or net?
That'll be
or
net.
do you know?
My guess, 98% sure,
That'll be
is that
net, yeah.
that's your net size of property being sold.
So back to your comment about market forces, I think that's the ultimate question is does market forces and a developer or a property owner have the right to dramatically change the character of a neighborhood? And that's where you're balancing property rights against the rights of the community. And I think the issue for me is that I don't personally see a huge incentive to change the character of Centerville dramatically. People move here and the property values are high because there is a character. If it turns into Anywhere USA, then it loses its character. So the market forces thing, yeah, that's debatable to some degree. I think the issue is what represents the definition of your community, and I think part of that definition core to the community is the single-family developments. And that's just from my perspective. I don't know, I'm throwing that out.
I agree with you 100%, and that was my point, is that I think it's the single family that's the key, and that people wouldn't necessarily say a 5 or 6 per acre single-family home neighborhood next to my neighborhood is going to dramatically change the character. That was
Okay, I just wanted clarification on that. So,
yeah.
And with a certain amount of aging in the community, which I represent,
Yeah.
I'm right now looking for
The small yard.
a smaller, a considerably smaller yard, okay?
0.20.
Pardon?
.20?
I haven't gotten that far yet, but no, maybe .15. I'm not sure I want to I'm not sure I want to live with the 40% landscaping either.
Valid point.
So how do we accommodate both halves? And
Well,
that's where I'm looking, because I think there's a fair number of people who are looking for what I'm looking for.
Right, and that's where I think you have to, what has been said and repeated is, if it's a single-family character you're looking for, then you're less worried about whether it's a 9,000 square foot lot versus a 10,800 square foot lot. And so what we'd have to do is, what I really think you're going to end up doing in the long term, and now I'm doing some self-preservation for job security, is we're going to go back into, because you're going to anticipate that some like is going to happen in the southwest community, and then we'll allow that synergy to go, because those are the two pressure areas of the multifamily. And those are the areas we have the problem with the ranges. And so we need to go back in, and if you're comfortable on .20 acre lots, that's a 9,000 square foot lot, that's 5 units per acre. You know, maybe we have reset the gross density, or we return to the minimum lot size and talk about the variations with single family based on the neighborhood character. You know, if you go to Ford Canyon, you don't want to buy up the properties and do 5th acre lots. That doesn't make sense to begin with. But in somewhere else like Shayla and Heyman, who really was the inspiration for trying to add this back in, is saying, I like my neighborhood. And if my neighborhood's built on 5th acre lots, I'm really okay with it.
So
Well-
I haven't really looked at your neighborhood.
Oh.
You said yours is 13,000, hers is
Yeah.
9?
It's one of the most sought-after streets in the city, I think.
right after mine, but anyway. But out of,
It's-
how many homes, how many in the 13,000 square foot range lot, and how many?
Because I'm in weird back.
Because you're in the
corner.
weird back, and everybody else is down on the 9,000.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
just your classic Centerville neighborhood is what
Okay.
it is, so.
It's actually 4 per acre, but because they bought that whole piece of ground, they gave Tammy 13, so then they took it off of the other.
Everybody else's.
Yeah.
So the question I was going to pose to the council is, where do you want to go from here? But I think that
I have one more question for Corey.
Of course, I'm not saying we're
Okay.
cutting that off, but I'm saying that I think Corey, in my opinion, answered that question for us in that, remembering that this is a general plan. And so we just need to decide right now at this point, do we feel comfortable with the general ideas set forth? And then we will continue to work on this. We'll go to the pages lane and work on that general plan, and then we'll just continue to give Corey his job security and say, come back, let's tweak the actual ordinance to follow the.
And the other argument, just to be respectful, so it's fresh on the table, is if the intent is low density and the reaction of the trigger word is medium and high, and the intent is to go to low, there's certainly, what I was trying to portray is that the low on a gross is really about 5 on the net.
So let's maybe tweak to make that more clear, yeah. Okay.
So how big of a nightmare would it be to create a 4th density?
The creating it is
4.
easy. Where you want to place it is your hard job.
No, yeah,
But to create it, yes.
But in the current zoning code, if you were to say, okay, fine, we've had low, medium, and high, and we really feel like what we need is low, medium, high, and extra high, where it's 4 or less.
Extra high scares me to death, but yeah, go ahead.
Where it's 4 or less, it's 6 or less. So I'm
Yeah,
keeping
exactly.
I'm keeping the same 3.
Yeah, no.
4 or
there's-
less, but
yeah,
I
there-
add a 6
there-
or less, there's an 8 or less, and there's a 12 or less.
That's the beauty of the tool, is you can insert that in with a new set of bulk area requirements. The tough decision is when and where do you
Sure.
apply that?
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
just talking from a general standpoint.
So I have,
Pretty easy.
I think it's a great idea.
okay, I have
I
a
do too.
couple of technical kind of comments, but that would just depend if we want to spend that time on the direction the council's wanting to go.
What do you mean by
at this
technical? Are you
point.
talking
Well, it's a little
grammatical?
more than technical. It was a couple of clarity points, I would say.
Bring them out.
Okay.
This is where we're supposed to do it.
So Old Town Site states its boundaries as generally considered the area bounded by 100 North, 400 South Main Street, and 400 East. And then number 3 in A states medium or high-density non-single-family residential development is prohibited for any future new or redevelopment in this area, which we just had a lengthy discussion about. That feels really good to all of us as far as saying we want single-family, not non-single-family. Other than our Main Street corridor plan, major corridors or redevelopment of commercial, which is difficult, we do have an exception for that area. So I think for clarity's sake, even though this is just a general plan, it would probably be smart to just add a comma, except on Main Street corridor there, so that the general plan isn't conflicting with the existing zoning.
Where is that
And just so we
at?
know, the east side of the Main Street plan only allows up to 6 units an acre. And so that's already taken care of. Right, so I'm not worried about that being a problem, other than we don't want to confuse a potential
that's a
developer.
specific call out on that one. Yeah. Okay.
Are you proposing that in 1A, the first sentence where you're describing the area?
1A3,
Okay,
1A number 3. Medium or high-density non-single-family residential development is prohibited for any future new or redevelopment in this area, except on Main Street corridor. Whether or not
I don't like it, because that sounds like we're saying it's okay to have medium or high-density non-single-family residential on Main Street.
Well,
And I'm not okay with that.
someone can suggest another way to correct this language so that we're not confusing the Main Street corridor plan with, because I think we're all on
Yeah.
the same page. Old
If-
Centerville
if-
Town
if I
Site
were-
is the
if I-
neighborhood.
If I were writing that, I would insert the issue where you have a parent clause so that you recognize that the Main Street's called out as a separate district later in the neighborhood. You would say south, when we go back to it, generally considered the area bounded by 400 East, period, except
Fronting Main Street.
as outlined in this section. So
Okay.
you're not attaching it to the density, you're just attaching the first paragraph to say, hey, reader, there's another section that's
That's
on the
better.
Main Street.
So up in the description of the general
Old Town Site
boundaries.
you're talking about,
Yes, so back up, and that was the other idea that I had, is just to say east of the Main Street properties, or the properties facing Main or something, but.
Because I think Stephanie brings up a point, it could be confusing to say, well, then high density is okay here. But if
Right.
you put it up in the descriptor and just say, this is our old town, it's
Yeah.
generally bounded by this, except for, as per the section on the Main Street plan, refer to that.
Right, so,
Or so are you specifically trying to exclude the Main Street overlay area?
right.
Yeah,
right.
this
So then
doesn't-
just say excluding areas located in the Main Street overlay district pursuant to 1248.
And I
But why are we
appreciate,
excluding that? I
I
don't
appreciate
understand.
Stephanie and Corey's point that would probably be safer to put up in the first sentence, right? So that would be in the generally considered the area bounded by 100 North, 400 South Main Street, and 400 East, excluding the Main Street corridor.
Councilmember Meekum, I think the debate was what you're trying to say, and I think you make a point, whether you intended to get there, I'm going to be like,
You're gonna be like me
George
and
here,
presuppose
speak
for
for
you?
you
Sorry.
in behalf
I
of
need all the
you.
help I can get.
Yeah. The debate is that Main Street does allow medium-density multifamily. So the point that you're assessing is if there's potential direction to change that, the exception, this could help with the Main Street or, and the future of what it's going to be, or we need to accept it out because we've moved a slightly different direction. So the idea is if you didn't do the exception, somebody could interpret that on Main Street, you can't do the 6 units an acre according to the general plan, but the zoning ordinance allows it, and then we go and review the zoning ordinance on a project and we go, oops, the general plan doesn't like it. You get into this
That's
triangle
what I'm trying to
problem.
And actually, now that I think about it, South Main Street area has its own general plan, an entire chapter in the
Yes.
general plan, so we'll just refer to the general plan chapter rather than the zone.
Correct.
Okay, and then the only other thing that I wanted to bring up was the fact that we've had this lengthy discussion about the safety that this single-family only, whether it's low density or medium density, gives to the whole neighborhood. And so why don't we just add that to the Centerville Elementary area as well, so that it stays the residential medium, but we still say non-single-family home development not allowed? Because what makes that area distinct from any of the other area in this whole southeast neighborhood that we're talking about?
The
So
long
are you-
discussion
are
that we
you-
had about it buffering City Hall.
Yeah, I don't think we want to, I mean, I think we need to look at that. And I'm not opposed to, that's why I would like to come up with some more densities, so we don't have that high of a density.
But the whole discussion tonight has been, it's really not so much about the numbers as about the type of building. And so let's respect that the desire there is to keep the residential medium for buffer, but to say this whole southeast neighborhood, especially in the Dual Creek Historic District, we want to respect that flavor of single-family home.
I would think you would need to really put that out there to a public hearing.
Yeah, I don't
and
think that's something we can
not
change
something
right
we can
now when we
change
haven't
right
said that we're
now,
going
where
that
we
direction
haven't
at all.
talked to. I mean, you're changing something that people purchased 30 years ago but they purchased it as R2. They didn't purchase it as 8. So I don't have a problem with taking it back to what they purchased it as. But the city upped it without people even realizing it. So as we're coming into this, and we're going to have an R5, we could maybe have an R2 again, so that you've got a little buffer, but it's not huge. You know, it's
Yeah, I
not
mean,
this
I
huge.
think you have two ways in the planning approach. I mean, there is the argument that buffering different types of zones, I mean, you can't get out of that argument that you
Right.
generally try to do that, buffer types of zones. The issue is the way the language is spelled out, it's recognizing the residential medium at its whatever allowance under the RM. And so the future policy is saying, hey, in this uniquely described L's, T, whatever you call section, functioning as a buffer, is the future really up to 8 units an acre under a conditional use? Or, as Robin is indicating, you can go to the medium and maybe it is a duplex use, and maybe duplex uses are allowed in that zone, but it's not intended to be triplexes and sixplexes to maximize the 8 units an acre. It's to maximize up to 6 units an acre.
So,
Well, I just don't see the consistency, because we just talked about how important the character of Centerville is, and that it's a single-family home character. And that neighborhood, you're saying buffering City Hall, but that goes all the way at Parish Lane up to 400 East, where that's just only neighborhood. So I'm just seeing a stark inconsistency there.
so two questions. There's a number of duplexes there on Parish Lane.
Yes.
What if I bought one of those lots and said, you know, this thing is so run down, I tear it down and build it again? Can I?
Yeah, under the current guise
Under
of the general
current,
plan.
that's why
Under the
we're saying
current.
we don't want to change that.
Or if you even wanted to, if you could fit townhomes, you could do
I mean,
that.
an example is you have the Canyon Point is on their final site plan process. It's the deep properties just off of the east end of the main street, one lot back. They've got that little old house, I forget it's a historic little small, got blue shutters now.
Mm-hmm.
They're keeping that house, but tucked in behind is the RM zone, and they're putting in a triplex and a duplex on that lot
So
right
that's why
now.
I'm saying, I think we need to not take totally away from these people, but we need to rein it in so that we're not getting that in people's backyards.
And that would be an 8 unit an acre development.
And that's
What I
why
hear
we-
you saying is maybe medium, but a different type of zone where a duplex is allowed, but it's allowed on even 4 units an acre, but in a duplex form rather than in
Right,
a
right,
single family
because I
form.
think that's what it was to originate when people bought it.
I think that job security question, don't worry about it. I think we're going to have lots of flavors after this.
I'm successful
wait, huh?
finally. I'm successful in my pitch.
Well, I think the granularity is not a problem. I think we should have it. I think we should be able to be respectful of the character of neighborhoods with granularity rather than just, here's the cookie cutter that fits over the top of this thing. So we don't have a symmetrical town in any way, shape, or form. You can cut this town any way you want, and it's not symmetrical in its development. So I'm fine with leaving it tonight. But I would say anywhere that we have either new blue line language that says low to medium, leaving it at low, and then any additions where we went low to medium, adding a blue line, just take those out. And then that maintains a low. The plan is still low, and then we can go back and we can tweak what the zones look like in terms of how many flavors. And I would be happy with the rest of the language. I don't really have a problem with.
So is that a motion?
I don't think it was a motion.
It was a general statement, but
I think we're ready for a motion.
you want to
My
turn it
only-
into one?
Yeah, I think we're ready for a motion. My only clarification point is, do you accept the change to the first sentence of the Old Town site to clarify?
I liked Lisa's language with you said exclusion,
Excluding,
excluding.
yeah, excluding the area in the Main Street overlay corridor, and then with a general plan reference. We'll have to look that up.
It's hard to motion and say, and what Lisa said, but yeah, that would
works.
be the intent. I think that I will make the motion that we, so, okay, let me clarify how this is working, because we are not, we're accepting with amend for the Planning Commission recommendations. What's the correct language on that?
Right, so a motion, well, it's basically a motion to approve ordinance 2017-05 with the following amendments to Part 12-480, and then read the changes that you would like to this section.
So, well, I'll do it after. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
How do we get to the 5 to 6 if we take out the low to medium?
That's what we're gonna do when we come
We got to
back.
do that with the Planning Commission and come up with those slices. So if the intent is to say low, then we immediately have to turn around and start slicing this up into what categories of low, what medium, and what high looks like.
Right.
Or redefine low and medium, yeah.
Yeah.
So in effect, we're kind of half approving it and sending it back.
Well, we're signaling that the intent is low, because this isn't zoning. But,
Single-family low.
right.
Single-family, yeah.
Single-family, low density, we're signaling that that's the intent of the council, is to maintain low density. And then we turn around and we immediately start figuring out what these slices should be. Is it 4, 5, 6?
Yeah, it's
4
giving
through 5?
it's
Yeah.
given recognition that the Planning Commission made a good point, but you're not trying to define that point with the general plan. You'll define that point with the zoning.
Right.
Yeah, this is the course adjustment, that's the fine adjustment on it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, I've lost all my language, but we'll try again. So, the motion is to approve ordinance 2017-05 with the amendments to Part 12-480 to remove all references that state low to medium, to replace with low, and to add that was one, Tammy, which one was it you had?
Paragraph 1, residential policies, A, Old Town site, first sentence.
To add the exclusion
Yes,
area
at the end
as,
of that sentence.
as defined by Lisa.
Excluding the area in the Main Street overlay corridor area as defined in the general plan.
Yes,
Reference.
yes,
We'll put the reference in there.
right.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? We have a
So that
motion
we're
and a
just
second.
taking those out where they've been added in, the
Did you
medium.
didn't mention
Well,
that.
there's new language as well, so there's somewhere where it's been added, and then we
Right,
have
we're
some
just
blue line
taking-
language that is just adding it in there, so,
Right, so we're just taking the blue line out that's adding it in. but we're
yeah,
not
if
taking out
I could say
what's
search
already
and replace, anywhere where it says low to medium, it just goes to low.
Yeah, I think we're all clear on
Yeah.
what you
So are you
did.
saying in all areas?
In all
or
references
just
that
in
are new
Old
or
Town site?
additions to.
That are new, but we're not
Oh,
changing what
new,
was
so
already
anywhere
there.
where it's new that we say medium, really,
Right.
those are the areas you
Right,
want
so there's a
out.
couple places where,
So
where
we're
like
looking
Centerville
in-
Junior High area,
So for sure in the Old Town site, 1A,
so all areas where it's mentioned. So if you go down to Centerville Junior High, for example, it says down there in the highlighted subsection
Right.
1, it says
D1.
low to medium.
so D, yep.
So I'm saying all sections where that's mentioned, because we also have,
It's also in the southeast residential area.
yeah, so it's.
But if it already said medium, we
Right,
can
if
leave
it already
it.
said medium, we're leaving it, which is the only place is the Centerville Elementary where it says low and medium. That's not in blue, that's not an ad.
Yeah, that's not an ad, so any ads where
That
we
would
changed
be-
it,
That will stay the same.
yeah, that's the intent. So anywhere where it says low to medium, where it's an addition or new language, then it's just low.
Great. All right, I'll leave that up to Corey.
Okay, any further discussion now that we have a motion and a second? I'd like to just state right now that I think that we're all basically on the same page. I am going to vote no to this because I do feel uncomfortable approving general plan based on language that does not yet exist in our code. I feel much more comfortable approving it with the intent, which was thoroughly thought out by the Planning Commission and the language that they used. Then, when and if we do actually, in fact, change the zoning code, then we can come back and make the tweaks to the language here to match the new zoning code. But I feel that that leaves us vulnerable to lose the intent until we are sure that that change to the zoning code happens.
Okay, are you doing a roll call vote? Do you want us each to say something? Because I will add that I'm saying yes, because we're signaling very clearly the intent of the council is we're maintaining the low-density character. And I don't think that the general plan and the zoning, they're not in conflict at this point. And in fact, what Robin's recommending, I think, is better. I mean, Corey's claiming subliminal messaging, but I think the intent is better to go ahead and add that granularity, because then we are preserving property rights in the future. So I have no problem voting yes, because it does preserve what the intent of the council is.
Other than it does exclude the existing fabric, many of the existing
Well, I think we're in a
neighborhoods.
vote right now, so
Well, I wanted to make that statement, and also I'm uncomfortable with the inconsistency, so, okay. Yeah, we'll have a roll call vote. Go ahead, George.
Aye.
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 No.
Aye.
Okay. Excellent. Now we can move on to item number 4.
Chair,
Do you want to skip
could we
up
skip ahead
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
our guest, number
Yep.
5?
Let's do item number 4 in a few minutes and skip to item number 5, educational briefing regarding employee health insurance options. Steve, do you want to give us a little bit of background as to why we have this guest
Well, I
here
would
tonight?
defer to Councilman Entz because he, I think, made this offer, so.
I would like to introduce Colleen Meller. She and I have worked together for 15, 18 years. She supervises, runs the health insurance practice for our office, has a staff of people, and they have 300 to 400 groups, from as small as 5 people to as high as 400 to 500, right, Colleen?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I just felt with all the discussion that we had last year that hearing from someone who is not selling anything about what's going on, and it's probably an unfair day with what was released, to
Yeah,
ask
thanks,
her to
Bill.
come.
Good timing.
I did it last week.
He's buying you lunch or something, right?
That's exactly right.
Oh, just committed you. Sorry, Bill.
No, I have already told my assistant that she needs to find out what day this week I can buy her and her staff.
No, I'm happy to talk with you about this.
So it gives us the chance to talk and ask questions. I've explained that we cannot do business with the city because I am tainted. And
That's
she is
your
here
piece of
because she's a
paperwork.
good friend, and I just totally look to her for this kind of information.
Thank you.
One more thing.
Okay.
She does have a copy of the health plan out of the handbook as it exists today.
Yes.
And it's attached to your notice as well.
Well, I have some general information for you because we know last evening was a big event where the Republicans did release their ideas for repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act. And I thought you might like the high overview that tells you what they're planning to keep and replace so far. And to be honest, those of us that are in this industry, we think this is a great start, but mainly because they're going to actually talk it through
each point, rather than just passing it. There's going to be a lot of discussion. But it was interesting, I prepared my information for you yesterday morning before that announcement, and it pretty much predicted exactly what you see there. So here's just a copy of some of my thoughts that I wanted you to have. So first of all, we know that the government is looking at health care, and I think a lot of employers have sort of put their healthcare decisions on hold, waiting to see what was going to happen. Should we move into, in fact, Bill said that you'd mentioned, should we move into HSAs? How will they be handled? What's happening? So the first thing that happened, the very first day that President Trump took office, was he signed an executive order, and I did include that in your packet, stating that we needed to minimize the administrative burden of the Affordable Care Act. There are so many things that are so burdensome. I'm hoping that includes things like the 1094 reporting, measurement periods for employees. I'm hoping all those things will be addressed. Those are huge burdens for employers. You'll notice in the update that the employer mandate will go away. Employers will not be required to offer coverage, and nor will there be penalties for those that are uninsured. But they're going to handle it a different way, and I actually love what the idea is. It's if someone goes uninsured and then later they want to get health insurance, they will be penalized more like Medicare enrollees are, where they'll be penalized for each month that they were uninsured. So if I go uninsured and suddenly need coverage, they can't decline me, but I'm going to pay more than my neighbor that stayed insured because I was not responsible and did not stay insured. And I think it's actually a better way to penalize people. It will make them stay insured. Another nice thing is, rather than us having these subsidies built into our premiums, these are going to be given back in tax credits instead of us paying subsidies for people. And I think that will actually be an advantage to premiums as well. So as you can see, I did include some of the just general information on the law, but I wanted to address specifically maybe some things about your plan, some things I saw, things that I would maybe recommend in the future if I were your broker. First of all, HSAs really are the future of healthcare. About 80% of employers in the U.S. now offer at least an HSA as an option. And you'll notice that I did include a page in here about how President Trump wants to expand HSAs, and all of the ideas are excellent. Things like allowing us to double our contributions into the health savings account, putting over-the-counter medications back in as an eligible expense, just really expanding the advantages of these plans. I also noticed that you do offer the Select Care Plus network of Select Health, and honestly, that is an expensive network. The thing that the carriers are doing now is they're tightening up their networks, and it used to be you really had to offer that higher, more expensive network in Davis County because of Tanner Clinic, but now the smaller network with Select Health accepts Tanner Clinic, so I would look at your networks.
Colleen, could I ask you a question about
Yes.
that? When you say Select Care, we offer the Select Med and the Select Care, and we charge the employee any additional cost that goes with the Select Care above the Select Med.
What I would do instead is I'd pull your Select Care, because again, it's been required just to have Tanner Clinic. But last year, Select Health put Select Med and added that into Tanner. And I would put in the Select Value smaller network. A lot of premium savings. And we're just seeing there's not a need for that care network in Davis and Weber County anymore. So I'd look at that. And even more than that, Select Health now has a plan. And again, these network changes are really where the carriers are going. It's the only way they can control costs is to have different agreements with different providers. One thing I'd really look at your next renewal is something that Select Health is offering now called Share. It's an actual network. It's called the Share Network, and it's very similar to Select Med Plus. But it does require some things for an employer to do. And in return, what Select Health guarantees the employer is 4% renewal increases, if you'll do these things that they ask you to do. One is you do have to at least offer one HSA. You do have to contribute to the HSA as an employer. So to your point, Steve, here's what a lot of employers will do. We're going to pay the premium on on this level of plan, but if you're willing to go into the HSA plan, we'll put that difference into your savings account. That's becoming a really popular way for employers to contribute. Then you have your internal costs flat, but you're still contributing into the health savings account. It also requires a
Quick
wellness
question
program.
on that point. Do the employers usually do that year after year, investing the difference?
You don't have
Or
to,
is
but
that an
on-
incentive, like the first year?
You don't have to. Under an HSA, you don't have to, but in the share network, you do. It's an ongoing commitment. So it is one of the things that Select Health requires. Another thing that they require is a wellness program. You have to have one. Their wellness team is very heavily involved. They come out, they do biometric screenings, they have quarterly challenges that people participate in, and in order to keep those 4% renewals, you do have to meet the participation levels. So 50% is a common participation level. They need to be able to see that your employees are participating. And a lot of employers want wellness programs anyway, so we think it's a great win-win all around. And our groups that have gone on share have been really happy with it. Another requirement is you do have to have a primary care physician. For several years, they haven't required that, and now they're finding that if you can have what they're calling medical homes, meaning this, let's say Tanner Clinic is my clinic, and Dr. Smith is my primary care, they really do find that if people will have a medical home where Dr. Smith can manage my care, that costs really are decreasing, and they are going back into the primary care system. So I would look at the share option to keep your
Just a
renewals
quick
stable.
question again. Having a primary care, does that mean that you have to go see the primary care before you can go see a specialist?
It does require referrals. So just an option though. And so that's really what I see the future. Number one, health savings account. I would not fear going into that world. The key is education. I would also look at these type of options. Select Health's not the only one that offers these type of plans. All the carriers are putting together these very managed plans, and the incentives are more stable costs, more stable renewals, some wellness, things that employers want anyway. And I would just, the thing that they reminded us today is to remember, the ACA is the law of the land until further notice. I would plan your next renewal around the fact that the mandates are in effect until we hear further, that the discussion will begin, but I expect much discussion, much protest. And I actually thought that Chuck Schumer had a great comment today when he said somewhere in all the horse excrement we'll probably find a pony. I thought it was great, so I think we will. I think that we will come up with some good solutions, but at least we're going to be talking about it. And I like the fact that the health insurance companies have been invited to be a part of the discussion.
What's been your typical experience with older employees or employees who have ongoing, reoccurring medical conditions, or they're on maintenance medications? How do you convince them that an HSA is in any way useful to them?
Well, normally the way that we do it is we put in a lower out-of-pocket maximum so that the HSA for a chronic user really is their best bet. And they have found that 85% of employees are better off on an HSA. That's the statistic. The healthiest and the sickest are actually better off on an HSA because once that deductible is met, it's met for the family. So if you are an older spouse and employee, if that employee has an expensive med and they meet that, they've met it for the spouse. And so benefit structure is the best way to incentivize, plus employer contribution. And employers now are offering choice. They're offering 5 or 6 different health plans. A lot of them are going into a defined dollar amount. Employees, we love you, we want to take care of you. If you're single, we give you $300 a month. If you're a family, we give you $6. And we offer you 5 different plans. Feel free to do what's best for you. And if you'll take this HSA, you'll notice there's also a contribution. So that's where the incentivizing comes, is the benefit structure itself.
Colleen, but when you talk about offering a number of options, isn't that more feasible with the larger organizations as opposed to the 50 employee? I mean, with the 50 employee, organization, offering 5 options may not be as feasible as if you're several hundred employees. I don't know, I'm asking.
Not at all. In fact, I'll give you an example. Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield will allow you to offer up to 5 different health plans to a group of 2. I literally have Blue Cross groups of 10 employees that have 5 different health plans. And the reason the employers are doing it is they're drawing a line in the sand. This is our defined contribution. We want to offer you benefits, but we can't keep up with these increases and everything. So this is our defined dollar amount. These are your benefits, and they're even drawing a further line in the sand. And this is the dollar amount I will offer you for the next 2 or 3 years. I will review my defined contribution at that point. But if there are any increases for the next couple of years, you'll be absorbing them. So be careful in your usage of the plan. And education is the key. So we're trying to balance that line between internal costs being kept as flat as possible and making the employees feel, you know what, I can't complain about my health plan, I chose it. And employee satisfaction goes up a lot. And I'll tell you the key, no offense to you gentlemen on the board, but the key in your health benefits is to involve the wives. If you will have your female employees and the wives of your male employees to have their own special training meetings, as soon as the women understand the benefits, we see the satisfaction level raise very high, and we also see the understanding of the plans raise very high because it's the women that tend to use the benefits. We're the ones that take care of it. So those are just some things I would really focus on this year as you look at your renewal. And then I think the next 6 weeks especially are going to be very interesting.
Well, Bill, you were right. She's a great guest to have. Thank you for inviting her. Any
Yeah,
questions
thank you, and
for
that,
Colleen?
you've really given us some information that I didn't have, so I appreciate you.
Good. I hope that was helpful, and if you ever need anything, Bill knows how to get in touch with me.
Thank you very
so
much
much.
for your time.
Thank
It
you,
was great.
Colleen.
Okay, we'll jump
Thanks, Tim.
back to number 4 and talk about awarding a bid for the annual crack seal, slurry seal streets contract to Intermountain Slurry Seal. The amount for that is $376,754 and 82 cents.
Yeah, and let me explain something before you act on that. You might be interested in knowing how this is funded, because it isn't all from one source, as you might have picked up in the attachments. So I've done a breakdown here. Up the $376,755 award would break down as follows in terms of funding sources. $318,722 would come from the Transportation Projects Fund. Just, you remember what that one is with the Class C gasoline tax money, the Proposition 1 sales money, and then a transfer from the general fund of a couple $100,000. And then these amounts, RAP tax would provide $11,340 because of the work that's related to parks, trails, and parking lots. And then $39,009 would be for the MTC, Centerpoint, and Chick-fil-A asphalt surfaces, and that would be paid for by those parties through their property owners arrangement that they have. And then
Can you, when we're done with the funding, can you go back to that property owner's arrangement? I'd like to understand that a little bit
okay.
more.
And then the Woods Park developer, if he chooses to stay, to be involved in this, that's the $7,684, but we would tack on 5% for handling this, for administering it. That's been our practice in the past when we include a new development that has to do a slurry seal, for example, within the year or two of being finished. We allow them the opportunity to participate in our project, but they have to pay for it, obviously, and we add in a 5% there for administering that.
And is that still cheaper for them?
Yeah. Well, they make that decision, and usually they do participate because they probably realize that, yeah, that is cheaper for them.
Well, the setup fee is much cheaper. We all house all the material down here, so it's much cheaper for them having to set up somewhere else and bring the material, so it is cheaper for them.
Yeah. So that was there's 4 sources there that I've mentioned for the funding. Questions?
Yeah, could you go back to the property owner arrangement allows them to participate in the city contract like that? I'm just trying to understand how we're offering it to Chick-fil-A, but say not Walmart or Taco Bell or anyone else who's got asphalt.
Well, the Performing Arts Center building is owned by the RDA, and so we have been a partner in that sense in letting them take advantage of this. Crack sealing has been done over there. Have we done slurry seals before over there, or is this the first time for slurry seal? Slurry seal. Yeah, and they, those three properties are all part of a property owner agreement or association that was created when the RDA sold pieces of this property. RDA owned the whole site and then sold pieces of it to MTC, and MTC in turn sold a piece to Chick-fil-A. But right from the very beginning was this property owners association that was set up through documents that the city actually created, so that there would be a maintenance, coordinated maintenance effort of the grounds and the parking lots and so forth. And there is an annual maintenance agreement that is put together for the grounds that MTC actually takes charge of, but then they charge to the other parties their respective parts. So CenterPoint is paying a piece of the grounds maintenance, for example. And in the spirit of that, we have offered them to participate in the asphalt.
Don't we park on those facilities as well?
Well, that's, yeah, we have cross-access. That's a good point, Randy, thank you. Cross-access parking to benefit the Performing Arts Center. On all those parking surfaces, the MTC parking lots are all available in the evening for parking for the theater.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just,
Yeah.
it made sense for MTC and the Performing Arts Center, and then when I read Chick-fil-A, I'm like, gotta figure out how that dynamic works out.
Yeah.
I have another question. When we say that the RAP tax is paying some, which proportion is that? Because we already said, here's how we want to divide up the RAP tax that's coming in right now.
Well, if you remember, you may not remember the cash flow diagram I did when we were talking about funding for the community park expansion. I had a line item in there, an amount that represented much more than this, because it represented over a several-year period what we had projected as doing with the asphalt surfaces in the parks. So we have taken that into account in that 85% allocation.
Okay.
It's that 11,340 is part of that larger number that I had in that cash flow analysis.
Okay.
Does that
I just
answer
wanted to make
your
sure
question?
that's our.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Steve? I would entertain a motion to award this bid.
I would move that we award the bid for the crack seal slurry.
To put black stuff
to
up,
Intermountain
stuff on the-
Slurry and Seal in the amount of $376,754.82.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we just have a few items left. Does anyone want to take a break, or should we keep plowing through? Either way is fine with me. We're
I'm
good?
dying to get into municipal code.
All right,
I actually would prefer the break because I left my,
let's just do a quick one.
yeah, I just
Okay,
gotta get
2 to
something
3
out.
minutes, we'll be back.
Thanks, Randy.
Randy, don't walk too fast.
Oh, plus we're still on.
We're still on.
We'll be such a fast break, I don't know.
don't want us to turn it off?
Are we killing the mics, Jake?